Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Now we are also available on Telegram, so join our Telegram channel by clicking on the link that is available in the description below to get the latest updates from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 12th July 2021, and the articles that we will discuss are displayed on your screen. So let us start our discussion. Now, this article on page number 6 has been written in the context of Italy showing its interest in developing relations in the Indo-Pacific region in order to counter the rise of China. So recently, Italy has shown interest in aligning with India and Japan in a trilateral cooperation in order to counter China. Now, Indo-Pacific has already become the epicenter of geopolitics because of the United States of America focusing on Indo-Pacific in order to counter Chinese assertion and aggressiveness. And that is why Indo-Pacific has become one of the important areas or one of the important epicenters in the geopolitics. So in this context, the article analyzes the need for India and Italy to get along in the Indo-Pacific region and how the trilateral alignment between India, Japan and Italy can play a key role in countering China in the Indo-Pacific region. So let us look at all these aspects which are important for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view. Now at this stage, Italy has just shown the interest in forging a cooperation between India, Italy and Japan. And the aim of this cooperation will be to counter China in the Indo-Pacific region. So nothing concrete has come up till now. However, in this background, we will analyze why are the Western powers looking towards Indo-Pacific right now. Then what are the opportunities and stakes for India and Italy to align in the Indo-Pacific region. And as far as the alignment of these countries is concerned, how things should proceed from here when already Italy has shown the interest in the Indo-Pacific region. Let us look at all these aspects one by one. Now the first question comes up as to why are the Western powers looking towards Indo-Pacific region. We already know that Indo-Pacific is the theater of action these days because of the economic rise of China. And because of the economic rise of China and the regime that is ruling China, China is asserting itself in the Indo-Pacific region. This is clearly visible in the dispute that is going on in the South China Sea. Then we note that China is involving itself into debt diplomacy, or it is also termed sometimes as checkbook diplomacy, through its infrastructure projects in various developing countries in Southeast Asia as well as in the Indian Ocean region. And one of the strategies of China of countering or encircling India is known as string of pearls theory. And in this line, China has been developing various ports. For example, it has been developing Hambantota port in Sri Lanka or the Gwadar port in Pakistan. So all these actions of China clearly highlight that China has been assertive and aggressive as far as its presence in the Indo-Pacific region is concerned. Further, China is involved in a border dispute with India along the line of actual control, and the showdown was seen in the Galwan Valley incident that happened last year. Now, China is showing its aggressiveness towards not just India or the Southeast Asian countries and the Indo-Pacific, it is also showing its assertiveness against United States of America. And the last presidency of United States of America got itself indulged in a trade war with China. And that clearly shows that US sees China as one of the biggest threats to its authority in the global geopolitical order. So in order to counter China, the Western powers are now looking into the Indo-Pacific region and their presence in this particular region. Now in this background, it has been argued that to counter Chinese influence and rise, the traditional alliances that existed will not be very effective. For example, we note that after the Second World War got over, the world got itself into a Cold War, and the world was divided into two camps. One was led by the United States of America and other by the erstwhile USSR. However, after the disintegration of USSR in 1990s, the world had become unipolar and USA was the only superpower that existed in the geopolitics. However, with the rise of China, the authority of United States of America has come under threat. And in this line, it has been argued that the traditional alliances that were forged after the Second World War during the Cold War period in order to counter the rise of USSR or the erstwhile USSR will not be very effective in countering the China. And as such, in order to counter China, there is a need for multilateral alignments in this particular region where China is aggressively involved. And this kind of thought process is clearly visible in the new alignments that are shaping up in the Indo-Pacific region. First and foremost is the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, of which India, United States of America, Japan and Australia are part. Then there is Supply Chain Resilience Initiative, which aims at countering the global supply chains that have been dominated by China, and the members of this Supply Chain Resilience Initiative are the subset of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. That is, except United States of America, India, Japan and Australia have got themselves into a Supply Chain Resilience Initiative, which aims at countering the economic dominance of China on the global supply chains. Then there is Malabar Naval Exercise, of which the members are the same as that of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. And all these initiatives are clearly showing that new alignments are shaping up in the Indo-Pacific region, where India is playing a very crucial role in all of these. And these new alignments that are taking place in the Indo-Pacific region will be very important in countering the rise of China in this particular region. Now, in this background, Italy has shown its interest in the Indo-Pacific region. So clearly, these were the reasons behind Italy's interest in the Indo-Pacific region, because of rise of China and Italy wanting to counter the rise of China. So in this background, let us look at what are the opportunities and issues as far as India and Italy are concerned in countering the Chinese rise. Now, as far as Italy and India are concerned and their relationship in the Indo-Pacific is concerned, it has been argued that in the existing alignments like the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, etc., in all these alignments, the participating nations are able to address specific common challenges, which include from maritime security to a coordinated response to the pandemic. And further, the countries that are aligning in the Indo-Pacific region are involving themselves into developing strong reciprocal trade relationships. And Italy of late has realized and has become more vocal on the risks that are emanating from Chinese strategic competitive initiatives. Now, we note that China has been strategically involving itself in different geopolitical theaters. And one of the foremost and important Chinese intrusion is in the Iran. And China has forged a partnership with Iran, which is a strategic comprehensive partnership. Again, China has involved itself into a partnership with the European Union as well. So clearly it shows that China has involved itself into strategic competitive initiative. And as such, Italy, which is the part of European Union, has become more vocal on the risks that are emanating from Chinese strategic competitive initiatives. Now, recently the Italian PM had described the Chinese competitive practices as unfair and had invited the European Union to be more frank and courageous in confronting China on its violations of human rights. And the Italian PM had also reiterated about China that the global visions of China and that of European Union are not compatible and are very different. As such, Italy is seeking to take interest in the Indo-Pacific region by showing interest in aligning with India and Japan in a trilateral cooperation relationship. Further, we already note that India is already forging relationship with the like-minded countries that are interested in preserving peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. And this has been the outlined goal of India in aligning with the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue or the Malabar Naval Exercise or Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. Now, as Italy has clearly outlined its stand on China and has been pushing the European Union to come forward and criticize the Chinese strategic competitive initiatives, let us look at how things should proceed from here. That is, how the relationship between India, Italy and Japan should proceed from here in order to effectively counter China in the Indo-Pacific region. Because at times we have seen that countries have shown interests, but those kind of interests have not turned or translated into relationships. So in this background, it has been argued that Italy will first have to clearly outline its Indo-Pacific strategy. So this is the first step that Italy should follow from here. Further, Italy will have to play a crucial role in forging EU-India strategic partnership. We note that Italy is one of the important members of the European Union, and India is already seeking a strategic partnership with the European Union. So in this line, Italy will have to play a crucial role in forging the relationship between India and EU to make its relationship or presence in the Indo-Pacific region effective. And by involving European Union, the countries of the world will be able to effectively counter the rising Chinese assertiveness and aggressiveness. And in this background, it has been highlighted that the India-Italy-Japan Trilateral Initiative should be a forum to foster and consolidate a strategic relationship. And such cooperation can be right forum for India and Italy to learn more from each other's practices and interests and consolidate a strategic dialogue that should include the economic, security, and political dimensions. Now, one of the interesting things is that the next G20 Leaders Summit will be held in Rome, which is the capital of Italy. And from there on, the presidency of the G20 will be handed over to India. So, as Italy will be holding this year's G20 Leaders Summit, and next year India will be holding this G20 Leaders Summit, it's a great opportunity for both the nations to clearly set their agenda as far as the Indo-Pacific region is concerned and their relationship is concerned. And finally, it has been argued that such alignments can create virtuous and mutually beneficial reorganization of the global supply chains that have been dominated by China of late. We already know that China is the largest manufacturer of the world, and it has been involved in trade with different countries, and the global supply chains have been dominated by China as far as manufacturing is concerned. So in this line, such kinds of relationships that are being developed in the Indo-Pacific region to counter China will have to clearly set their agenda or economic agenda as well as security and political dimensions of their relationship. And if these cooperation initiatives turn out to be fruitful, they will help in creating mutually beneficial supply chains which will be able to counter the China-dominated economic supply chains that exist presently. So these are few articles. This is a developing story, and more will be known in the coming days when Italy really gets involved in the Indo-Pacific region by the way of a cooperation strategy finalized between India, Japan and Italy. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 1 is related to the new population policy that has been released by the Uttar Pradesh government. In this line, the targets that have been set by the Uttar Pradesh government is to decrease the total fertility rate from the present 2.7 to the replacement level fertility rate at 2.1 by 2026, and further to reduce this replacement level fertility rate below the 2.1 to 1.7 by 2030. The population policy also includes increasing modern contraceptive prevalence rate and also increasing the male methods of contraception. And finally, it aims at decreasing maternal mortality rate, decreasing infant mortality rate, and decreasing under 5 mortality rate. Now we note that presently Uttar Pradesh is the most populous state in India. And this huge population of Uttar Pradesh is being seen by the present administration as a roadblock to removal of poverty and development of the state. And as such, the government has come out with a draft population policy. In this line, the population policy outlines that awareness and extensive programs would be held among those communities and cadres and geographical areas that have a higher fertility rate. The Uttar Pradesh CM has said that we should not forget that increase in population contributes to poverty in a society, and hence until all the sections are made comprehensively aware, there will be a delay in fulfilling various goals. In this background, let us first try and understand some concepts related to population growth and how the population growth takes place in a country or in a state. Also, we'll take a look at the policies that have been adopted globally for either increasing the population or decreasing the population in different parts of the country. For example, China, which is the most populous country of the world, had adopted the one-child policy. However, it has abandoned that policy recently. So we will look into some of the examples of population policies that have been adopted by various countries across the world in the past, and also we will look at the recent highlights that have been provided in the economic survey regarding how the Indian population policy should look like. Now, how does population growth take place in a country? So population growth is basically dependent upon 4 fundamental factors. First factor is the birth rate, second one is the death rate, third is immigration, and finally emigration. Now, birth rates, that is the newborns as well as the people who are migrating into the country, will definitely lead to increase in the population. However, the other 2 factors, that is death rate and emigration, will lead to decrease in the population. And the net population growth rate of a country will be birth rate plus immigration minus death rate plus emigration, that is how many people have died and how many people have moved out of that particular country. However, in a country where immigration does not take place or emigration does not take place, the population growth rate will be dependent upon birth rate minus death rate. In this line, there is another concept that is known as total fertility rate. And this total fertility rate of a population is the average number of children that would be born to a woman over her lifetime. And a related concept to total fertility rate is the replacement level fertility. And this is that level of fertility in which the average number of children that are born per woman will be exactly replacing itself from one generation to next generation when the immigration is not taking place in that particular country. And this rate is roughly 2.1 children per woman. So, if each woman in a country gives birth to just two children, then the population of that particular country will be stable if there is no migration taking place in that particular country. So, this is simply the concept of replacement level fertility when each woman in a country gives birth to only two children. Now, at times we note that there are some women who do not choose to have children, while there are others who will have more number of children. So this replacement level fertility highlights the average number of children that are born per woman. And if this number comes out to be 2.1, then in that scenario, the population of that country will not increase and will stabilize. Now what happens is that in populous countries, the birth rates are very high at times. And as such, the governments control or try to control these birth rates by coming out with population policies which aim at two children per woman. And accordingly, the Uttar Pradesh government has come out with its two-child policy in order to restrict the growth of population in the state of Uttar Pradesh. And by achieving this replacement level fertility, the Uttar Pradesh government aims at stabilizing the population of the state of Uttar Pradesh in order to have better outcomes in terms of poverty elimination and also developmental goals. So in those countries where migration is not taking place or migration is ignored, the countries come out with fertility based policies. And if the population of country is seen as decreasing, the countries come out with pro-natalist policies. While in those countries where there is high population growth rate, these countries come out with anti-natalist policies. Now these pro-natalist policies are those policies which are designed with the purpose of increasing the birth rate or fertility rate of an area. And they are found in countries with either very slow natural increase or natural decrease, or in those countries which are witnessing aging of populations. While the anti-natalist policies aim to reverse the situation, and they aim at encouraging people to plan smaller families, lower their fertility rates, and reduce the number of births. And these tend to be found in countries which have high birth rates and rapidly growing populations. So these are two types of policies that are adopted by countries based on the fertility in their countries. Now one of the example of anti-natalist policies which is aimed at reducing the population was adopted by China, and this was known as one child policy. So in China, a couple was allowed to give birth to only one child. And this policy of China was aimed at reducing the population in China. So China had introduced this policy back in 1978-1980, and this was encouraged forcefully by the Chinese government, which forced women to have abortions if they already had a children. But by adoption of such policies, China is seeing a new kind of crisis right now, and that is the aging of the population, and the number of population in the young age group who are in the working population is decreasing heavily. And because of the aging population, the number of dependents on the working population is increasing. And that is why the people who are working or the working population is reducing in China. And we note that Chinese economy is reliant on cheap labor. And because of reducing working population, Chinese economy might be adversely impacted in the future. And that is why China reversed this one-child policy a few years back, and now they are even promoting a three-child policies and promoting the women to give birth to more than two children. So let us look at a case study of Singapore, which had adopted both kinds of policies, that is anti-natalist policies as well as pro-natalist policies. So Singapore, which was witnessing high population growth rate, had chosen the anti-natalist policies back in 1972 till 1987. And some of the policy measures were access to low-cost contraception, creation of easy-to-access family planning clinics, use of media to promote smaller families, family planning population board establishment, and then sterilization programs were also promoted, and free education for small families was promoted. However, because of adoption of such anti-natalist policies, Singapore faced a shrinking population. And as such, it witnessed a aging population, and there were worries about future number of workers and old age dependency. And as such, the previous anti-natalist policy was reversed in 1986-87, and Singapore then adopted pro-natalist policies which aimed at increasing fertility in women in Singapore. Now, what were the measures that were adopted to increase the population? So, it allowed for increased maternity leaves to up to 12 weeks. Further, government sponsored dating agencies, government subsidized childcare, sterilization and abortion were discouraged, family planning and population board was abolished, and parents with good academic qualification would get enhanced child benefits. That is, all these policies aimed at promoting giving births in Singapore. And all these pro natalist policies were aimed at increasing the young population who will participate in the economy as working age population. Now, besides anti-natalist and pro-natalist policies, there are countries which adopt immigration-based policies to influence their population growth rates. And one such country which adopted such policy was Australia. So, between 1980 to 1985, Australia experienced the highest population growth of any developed nation, and this was because of high levels of immigration that took place in Australia. Further, countries like Canada and United States of America all are promoting immigration in order to stabilize their populations and working age populations. So we have seen that there are three types of population policies that have been adopted by countries across the globe. First one is the anti-natalist policies, which aim at reducing the population growth. Second one are pro-natalist policies that are aimed at increasing the population growth. And third ones are the immigration-based population policies, which aim at influencing the population growth rate. Now, in this background, the state of Uttar Pradesh has come up with a new population policy. However, Economic Survey of India had highlighted how India's population policy should look like. So let us look at the aspects that were highlighted by the Economic Survey related to India's population policy dilemma. Now, the Economic Survey had noted that India is set to witness a sharp slowdown in the population growth in next 2 decades. And the Economic Survey further states that by 2030, there will be some states in India which will have reduced population growth rates as compared to other ones. And as such, some states will start transitioning to an aging society, and these states will enter the demographic transition phase. And according to this demographic transition theory, nations slowly move towards a stable population as the fertility rates fall with an improvement in social, economic, and development indices over time. Now, presently, India's population stands nearly at 134 crores, while China is populated by almost 140 crore people. And in another 2 years, India is likely to overtake China and become the world's most populous country. So in India, we are seeing a contrast where southern Indian states are witnessing a decline in the population growth rates, while the northern states in India are witnessing high population growth rates. And clearly, the southern states have better social and economic development indicators as compared to their northern counterparts. Now, it is often said that India has a demographic dividend. This is because India has the youngest population in the world, and this young population can participate in the Indian economy, and it will lead to growth in the economy. However, for participation of such young population into economy will require large levels of skill development. Now, compared to India, we see that there are certain countries that have already witnessed such benefits of demographic dividend. In Japan, this demographic dividend started in 1964 and ended by 2004. While in India, this demographic dividend is likely to last for almost 37 years till 2055. Now, in India, there are two types of states, in which the first kind of states have total fertility rate lower than the replacement rate. That is, these states have a declining population or decreasing growth rate, while there are states which have total fertility rate higher than the replacement rate. That is, these states have an increasing population growth rate. Now, the first category of states mostly includes states from southern part of India, while the second category of states include states from the northern part of India which have high total fertility rate and are participating in increasing population in the country. And both these type of states have different kind of challenges, and accordingly the policies should be different for both these states. So in southern states which are witnessing decline in the population growth rates, they will have old age population, and as such there will be increasing dependency ratio in these states. and as such, their policy should focus on old age population policies. Further, there is a need for increase in investment in health in these states. Also, there is a need on focusing on increased migration in these states so that the working population does not fall in the near future. Also, at times it has been suggested that there should be increase in the retirement age so that working population does not decrease. While the northern states which have high fertility rate will have young population, and as such their focus should be on education and skill development policy. Also, these states should focus on job creation, and these states should also focus on sustainable development measures because these are the states which do not have high economic growth rate, and also the human development indicators are not very encouraging. So it has been suggested that these states should focus on improving the quality and enrollment in their school programs so that this young population can be converted into demographic dividend and they can be put to economic participation, and that will lead to improved human development indicators as well as improved economic growth rate. So there are two types of states in India and they have different types of challenges which need to be tackled differently. Now, as we have seen that there are two types of states in India, one that is witnessing aging of population or decreasing growth rates, while there are other states which are witnessing high population growth rates. Now, this kind of diversity also has policy implications, and as such, it might have implication on fund transfer. And when 15th Finance Commission adopted 2011 census for population criteria for the distribution of taxes amongst the state, the southern Indian states protested. As such, there is a need for developing cooperative federalism in different states to develop complementary policies of labor movement. So, those states which are witnessing a deficit in the labor can encourage immigration of labor from the populous states of India. Secondly, the migration pattern and effect must be studied well by the Niti Aayog. Also, adoption of policies like One Nation, One Card and cultural integration by Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat to avoid cultural conflict should also be promoted. Now, the population policy that has been adopted by the central government has always seen people as resources. And the national population policies of the past have never used the word population control. Now, currently, as many as 23 states and union territories, including all the states in the south region, already have fertility rate below the replacement level of 2.1% per woman. And this replacement level fertility has been achieved without using control measures. And as such, the governments of the day should focus on supporting the populations to become resources rather than focusing on controlling the populations. In 2017, the government mentioned that family planning program in India is target-free and voluntary in nature. And it is the prerogative of the clients to choose a family planning method best suited to them as per their reproductive right. And accordingly, it is seen that the control measures that are seen by different states in India are regressive in nature because already we have seen that in southern states which have seen high economic growth rates and development, the fertility rate has dropped below the replacement level fertility of 2.1 children per woman. So these are the points that are highlighted against using anti-natalist policies that are adopted by different countries or states, because in the past, various countries which adopted anti-natalist policies had to abandon those policies, and the examples are Singapore and China, which were witnessing aging population. And as such, they had to abandon these anti-natalist policies. And accordingly, it is suggested that UP, which is adopting a anti-natalist policy, should avoid or refrain from doing so and should rather focus on improving and using the population as resources in the Indian growth story. And in India, when already 23 Indian states are witnessing decreasing populations because of falling of fertility rate below the replacement level of 2.1 children per woman, it is suggested that the populous states should supply human resources to these states. And as such, complementary policies can be fruitful for the economic growth rate, and the human beings can be considered as resources rather than controlling their right to reproduction. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 6 basically talks about an anti-discrimination law that has been adopted in the state of Kerala. And if this law is enacted, this will be the largest expansion of civil rights in a state which can be emulated by the rest of India. So in this line, let us look at the different aspects of anti-discrimination law that has been proposed in the state of Kerala and how it could help in eliminating the discrimination that is practiced in our society. So some of the points that we discuss here can be important for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view in the part governance. Now when you look at the Article 15 of the Indian Constitution, it prohibits the state to discriminate against any citizen on the grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth or any of them. So in this line, the limitations have been imposed on the state. However, the Article 15 does not bar private individuals or institutions from doing what the state is not permitted to. That is, the private institutions or individuals can still indulge in some kind of discrimination. So the Article 15 does not expressly list ethnicity, linguistic identity, nationality, marital status, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, etc. as prohibited grounds of discrimination. Now, when the private individuals or institutions are not included under the Article 15, it is imperative on the states to create anti-discrimination laws, and as such, Kerala government has come up with an anti-discrimination law which should be adopted at a national level to increase the civil rights of the population. Now, first let us look at what kinds of discriminations are practiced in our society. So it is said that the discrimination practiced in India operates on various levels and can be categorized as direct discrimination, indirect discrimination or intersectional discrimination. Now, direct discrimination is characterized by intent to treat less favorably a person or a group. Now, one of the examples can be when an employer refuses to interview a candidate because he belongs to a scheduled caste. This is direct discrimination in relation to caste. Also, an employer fires a female employee after her marriage because he makes a stereotypical assumption that married women do not make efficient workers. And this is prima facie direct discrimination in relation to gender. However, there are indirect discriminations also. And discriminatory practices may also be indirect in nature, whereby the policies that seem neutral and not expressly targeted at a particular group still cause a disproportional adverse impact on the disadvantaged sections of the society. Now, one of the examples of indirect discrimination can be when an employer pays part-time workers a lower hourly rate than the full-time workers for doing the same quantity of work. And a majority of part-time workers in his establishment are women, but a majority of full-time workers are men. So this is prima facie indirect discrimination in relation to gender. Then there is intersectional discrimination, which was highlighted by the Supreme Court in the Patan Jamal Wali versus State of Andhra Pradesh. And intersectional discrimination happens when two or multiple groups operate simultaneously and interact in an inseparable manner, producing distinct and specific forms of discrimination. Now, one of the examples can be discrimination on the basis of intersection of personal characteristics such as that faced by Dalit women as Dalits, as women, and in the unique category of Dalit women. That is, a woman which is already a discriminated section in our society, if she falls in the Dalit category, which is also discriminated section, then this is known as intersectional discrimination. So these are three types of discriminations that are practiced in our society. And as such, it has been highlighted that to tackle the dimensions of discriminations that are being practiced, legal remedies in the form of comprehensive anti-discrimination legal framework is required to fulfill the existing legal regime. And accordingly, the authors have argued that the state governments under the entry 8 of concurrent list of 7th schedule can introduce an anti-discriminatory law that attracts civil penalties for those engaging in discriminatory practices. In this regard, let us look at the anti-discrimination law that has been drafted for Kerala, which can be adopted by other states as well as the central government. Now, this anti-discriminatory law that has been drafted for Kerala prohibits discrimination on various grounds. And the bill prohibits employers, landlords, traders, service providers, private persons performing public functions, public authorities, etc. from discriminating on the ground of caste, race, ethnicity, descent, gender identity, etc. And it aims at ending discrimination on those characteristics which are beyond the control of an individual or those that constitute a fundamental choice. Further, the bill provides for affirmative action. And the bill also introduces affirmative action provisions whereby public authorities are obliged to progressively realize diversification of their workforces by recruiting members of the disadvantaged sections excluded from the society, such as transgender persons or persons with disabilities. So this is similar to the reservation that is provided by the government in the government jobs. Then a state equality commission has also been proposed to be established by this anti-discrimination law. And given the backlogs in our judicial system, the bill establishes a Kerala Equality Commission to adjudicate complaints and to provide policy recommendations to the state governments. So the authors finally argue that if the bill is enacted, It will be the largest expansion of civil rights in the state of Kerala since the commencement of the constitution, and this can be a model for other states to follow. So these are few highlights of the anti-discrimination law that has been created by the state of Kerala, which can be used as a model by other states. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, after looking at the articles that were important for us from the mains examination perspective, let us look at these articles from which questions can be asked in your preliminary examination. The first article is on page number 7, and it talks about a global education coalition that has been floated by the UNESCO. And that is why it becomes important for us from the preliminary examination perspective. And accordingly, MCQs have been created based on these topics, and the understanding of these topics will be provided in the explanation attached to these MCQs. And you can attempt these MCQs in the form of quiz that is available on the eLearn platform, and the description for that is given in the description box below. Then the second question is based on Afghanistan and its location. And question has also been created based on the topic of first space tourism race that is being witnessed. And finally, along the line of actual control with China, protests have been seen from the Chinese side against the Dalai Lama's birthday celebrations. So MCQ has also been created based on this important location, that is Demchok sector. So just go through the eLearn platform and attempt this quiz and have your understanding of these topics from the prelims examination perspective. With this, we conclude today's discussion, and this is the question for the day.